In this video I'll talk a little bit about the next short story, which is titled Stairway to Death. It was previously titled Stairway to Hell, but for a bunch of reasons I changed that title. So in one of the other videos, or a couple of the other videos, you'll see me mention it as Stairway to Hell, but it is the same story. I just changed it to death instead of hell. This short story is basically inspired by a relatively old movie by John Carpenter called Vampires. It features James Woods in as one of the main characters. I enjoy that movie a lot. It's not, Oscar-winning material, which is obviously not the purpose of that movie either. But I actually had a good time watching it and liked it because it had a little bit of a different take on the genre of vampire movies. And I always wanted to do something along those lines in a story. So you can consider Stairway to Death basically an homage to that movie if you want. My protagonist has the same name as in the character, Jack, is very similar in many ways to how James Woods portrayed him in the movie. I didn't take over all the traits, but some of them that I actually liked a lot. The name Valerian Albanov came about because I wanted to use a similar name to the bad guy in the movie, whose name is Valek, but that was too obvious using the exact same name. I mean, people would trigger on that right away and figure out what the background was. So I looked for a different name, starting with the VA. Preferably with an L afterwards, and then I came up with Valerian Albanov. Found his story on the Wikipedia page, and I wrote the story called Death as a lead up to Stairway to Hell, and that's how it all started. Basically, just the stories were feeding off each other and getting together. So that's where that name came from. Coming back to Jack, just like in the movie, the Jack that I used is he's a bit of a tough guy. He's a good guy in essence. Fundamentally speaking, he's not a bad guy, but he's a bit of a thug and an asshole too. And I wanted to make sure that I could play with both sides of the character, not just him being an asshole and being this tough vampire hunter, but also showing his fundamentally heroic nature, if you will. So that obviously comes out near the end of the story. The second main character, Anthony, is very different from the Anthony in the movie. I just basically wanted him to be the opposite of Jack and also much younger, so that you can get this sort of father-son or mentor-student relationship going. So you would actually feel for Anthony when Jack gets taken away from him. So that was mainly how I wanted to work with Anthony. Then Albanov, basically he's a bit of a cliche. He's this typical image that people have of a loudmouth, big Russian that you often used to see in movies. For instance, the older James Bond movies had they would portray the Russian evil henchman like that. And I imagine him being this bombastic, over-the-top character with lots of melodrama, and try to basically bring that forward as he's from another time. He's over 100 years old, so he's supposed to be a little bit different in the way he talks, in the way he acts, than Jack and Anthony, who are from our time. So that was a little bit what went behind that. The whole ending scene basically with Jack and the Stairs is something that came from a dream I had when I was, I think, about 16 or 17 years old, maybe younger even, and I was reading a lot of vampire stories and seeing vampire movies back then, and I had this nightmare. It's one of the only times that I can remember that having a nightmare that actually was in episodes. That I woke up middle of the night because of the nightmare. I was up for a little while, fell back asleep, and the nightmare just picked up where I'd left it off and kept going. So that was a quite interesting experience, and probably that's why I remembered it for all these many years when I started writing this story. Anyway, in that nightmare, what happened is that I was chased by a vampire in my house, where I was living, in my parents' house, all the way up the stairs, and I'm running away from it, and obviously, just like in the movies, it's waiting for me when I get upstairs. And there weren't many options because I was everybody was dead and I was the last one standing. So and in my dream, I decided I'd rather commit suicide and jump from over the railing and let myself drop to my death head first to the floor, totally down the stairs. I would rather do that than turn into one of the monsters, into one of the bad guys. And so I do that in my dream, and what happens, I don't die. I just break my neck and I'm lying there, and then the vampire comes walking down towards me, and you can guess what happens next. So that was basically where the whole ending came from in Stairway to Death. And that was very much the first scene that I had in my mind when I started writing. It all had to lead to Jack's heroic suicide, and then it goes horribly wrong because he messes it up by accident. He doesn't die, he survives. So that's where that all came about. Now I've hinted at that a little bit before. The whole Albanov thing and Jack and so on. I have a lot of plans to write in those kinds of stories with those characters, and still working on it, developing a story world and setting everything up and making sure that it's everything makes sense and sticks together, and figuring all those things out, which takes a little bit of time, lots of research obviously, but it takes a little bit of time. But Albanov will return, so will Jack, so will Anthony. And if I can manage it, it'll be probably either longer short stories, so short novels, or actually full-blown books and a full series. I'm toying with the idea, but I don't know if I'm a big enough writer to pull that one off just yet. But I'm toying with the idea of making it actually a long book series, and again, I'm not quite sure if I'll get there, but making it with. As one of my favorite authors said, Jim Butcher from the Dresden Files, who has explained many times how he started writing that series, and basically as a very young man came up to his writing teacher and said, how about I make this a 20-book series? And she said, sure, whatever, give it a try, being very kind to him, and not saying that was pretty much impossible. But he did it anyway. I think he's at book 14 or 15 right now. So really thinking about that would be a lot of fun to do, but again, a big investment in time on my part, and not sure if it'll work out, but that's basically what's going on behind the scenes for this story here, Stairway to Death. The story in itself is one of the longest ones in the short stories that I've written so far for horrible endings, simply because it took a while to get to that scene, and I needed to do some stuff before we get to the heroic death scene of Jack, to set it all up so you would actually feel the emotions that I wanted to convey to you as a reader when we get to that part, and obviously the way it ends and the consequences that it has in the ending. If all goes well, the follow-up for that, what happens right after that scene, will pretty much be the first scene of a full book if I end up writing it. So and there's a very, very high likelihood that I will, because I'm very, very excited about working in that story world again, because it was way more fun than it should have been. I had the most fun of all the short stories with this one here. So that's a little bit of the background. Hope you like it, and I'll talk to you again soon.